we are going to go ahead and get started. Again, welcome everyone and welcome to our monthly meeting for the month of August. It's hard to believe that we are already at the end of summer, but I assure you that many of us are ready for fall, especially fall migration. So hopefully you all are getting out on the trails and attending some field trips and getting to see some of the early migrants. Before we get started with our panel on coastal conservation, I want to make a few announcements. So September is Georgia Grows Native for Birds Month, and so we want to encourage everyone to check out our website to find all of the events that we will have ready for you to participate in learning about birds and plants and how you can make the spaces that you occupy habitable for birds. So do feel free to check out the link on our website, which I have just put into the chat. And upcoming this weekend on Saturday, we have a program that is co-hosted by Chattahoochee Riverkeeper, Georgia Audubon, and some others that is for 4th through 6th graders. That's a day of learning on the river. They're going to learn how to paddle, they're going to go on a birding hike and do some real life hands-on science on the Chattahoochee River, and lunch is provided and it's all free. So I'm going to put a link to this event in the chat as well. Registration is still open, so please do feel free to register your 4th through 6th grader if you know one that might be interested. And with that, that is going to be it for our announcements. And I'm going to go ahead and get started introducing our wonderful panel who is here joining us from all around Georgia, and one who just left Georgia. We're very sad to see him go, but he is gladly here joining us for one last event. So firstly, we have Dr. Abby Sterling, who is a shorebird biologist and director of the Georgia Shorebird Conservation Initiative with Manomet. Dr. Sterling earned her doctorate degree from the University of Georgia, where she studied the influence of habitat and landscape features on beach nesting shorebirds and chick survival. Before her degree, she worked as a naturalist and a guide on the enchanting Little St. Simon's Island, where she assisted on a variety of environmental projects, educated visitors about coastal ecology, and explored the southeastern coast. She is actually originally from Western New York and attended SUNY College of Environmental Science and Forestry for her Bachelor of Science in Environmental Biology. So welcome to Dr. Abby Sterling. We're so glad to have you. Our next panelist is Adam Vetchual, who is the Conservation Director for us right here at Georgia Audubon, where he leads and oversees our statewide conservation initiatives, including Project Safe Flight, the Wildlife Sanctuary Certification Program, and our Habitat Restoration Program, just to name a few. He is originally from Columbus, Ohio, and he earned his bachelor's degree in ornithology from Indiana State University and studied white-throated sparrows as part of his graduate work at the same university. In addition to his work in conservation and his science, Adam is a global birder, and he leads incredible trips across the country and across the world as part of the Georgia Audubon travel program. So if you have not checked it out, I definitely encourage you to sign up for a future trip because you don't want to miss a trip with Adam. And then finally, but certainly not least, we have Sergio Sabat-Bonilla, who is the State Fellow for the University of Georgia Marine Extension Coastal Sea Grant in partnership with Georgia Audubon and the Jekyll Island Authority. Born and raised in Guaynabo, Puerto Rico, Sergio's curiosity about the natural world began along the beaches of his island, inspiring him to study wildlife academically. Sergio recently graduated from Georgia Southern University this summer with a master's in biology, and we're so excited for him. And in the fall, actually now, he is attending Virginia Tech to begin his PhD in entomology, or the study of insects. So we welcome you, Sergio, Adam, and Abby. Thank you so much for joining us. And so without further ado, I am going to pass it to Abby to talk about the work that she's been doing as a shorebird biologist with Manomet along Georgia's coast. And she's also going to help frame for us why Georgia's coast is so important for birds. Abby, I'll pass it to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Karina. And thank you so much to everybody at Georgia Audubon for joining and for hosting this great afternoon and for the invitation to talk to y'all today. I am going to flawlessly share my screen right now with everyone. Did that work? Yeah.
Yes.
Good. Thanks. Great. So I really appreciate the opportunity to join y'all today and talk a little bit about some of the work that we are doing at Manomet on the Georgia Bight Shorebird Conservation Initiative. So this initiative was launched several years ago, and I'll get into some of the work that we're doing on the ground to help protect the incredible places that shorebirds need here on our Georgia coast. So as Karina said, I just wanted to take kind of a step back and frame up a little bit about why the Georgia coast is so important for shorebirds. And I know for many of y'all, you've hopefully gotten to spend some time on the Georgia coast, but we'll dig in a little bit about what it is that makes the Georgia coast so special and why on a very lucky day, you could see all of the species in this one incredible shot that Brad Wynn got here. Just a huge diversity and really significant numbers of shorebirds. We'll talk a little bit about some of the big picture threats to Georgia shorebirds as well. And then I'll briefly touch on some of the work that we are doing, particularly as it relates to recreational disturbance and how we're addressing some of those threats for shorebirds with the Georgia Bight Shorebird Conservation Initiative. So like I said, I wanted to take a step back, and we're stepping way back and talking a little bit about the geography of the coast and what it is about the Georgia coast that makes it so special for shorebirds. So we are part of what's called the Georgia Bight. It stretches from Cape Hatteras down to Cape Canaveral, and it is this curved part of the coastline that you can see when you're looking at a map of the Southeast. And so because of this, we can see a couple of things just right off the bat here. This dark blue line here, that's continental shelf. So you can see where we are in relation to that. But then when we look at it a little bit more in depth, we can start to understand how all these features come together to create sort of this perfect recipe for shorebirds. So I love this figure, and if you've heard me talk before, you've probably seen me use it because I use it all the time because I think it's so exciting and cool. But when we talk about the Georgia coast, highlighted here in yellow, that's the very center part of the Georgia Bight, and it is quite far from the edge of the continental shelf. So that means a couple of things are happening, right? We've got one, pretty low wave energy here in the middle part of the Georgia Bight. That's shown by this dark black line. That's decreasing as you get to the most tightly curved part of the bight. And so we have low wave height, low wave energy, and that's because it's so shallow from the edge of the continental shelf to our coastline. Another thing that happens is we have really high tidal range here, especially as you get to the middle part of the coast. So we're talking about 6 to 8 feet of tidal range. When you combine these two things together, low wave energy and those huge tides, that's really what's responsible for the reason that we have such well-developed wide barrier islands and the very expansive salt marshes that you see between the barrier islands and the mainland. Another thing that you see when we're talking about the Georgia Bight is that we have a lot of inlets, river systems that come down and deposit sediments and bring down water out to the coastline here. So we have a lot of inlets, especially as you get to the middle part of the bight, and those inlets are spaced really close together. So that means lots of nutrients, lots of sediment, a really dynamic landscape, and really good base for invertebrates, and those invertebrates provide the food for shorebirds. So this, I really think of it as kind of the perfect recipe for shorebirds. We have these large, well-developed barrier islands with extensive, fairly remote beaches. We've got a chain of about 14 barrier islands on the Georgia coast, depending on who's counting. And 11 of those barrier islands are actually under some form of protection. So that's really significant for shorebirds. We also see very high tidal ranges here, as I said. And because of those tidal ranges, we have vast expanses of sandbars and mud flats that host tons of invertebrates, mussels, clams, copepods, all sorts of great food resources for shorebirds. And if you spent any time on the Georgia coast at low tide, you know, the landscape looks tremendously different from high tide when you've got lots of water. And just, it is basically an always refreshing, never-ending smorgasbord for shorebirds. We've also got the Altamaha River and other large river estuaries, bringing down all of those sediments that help build and shape our islands and sandbars. And another thing that's really important about the Georgia Bight is that we have a relatively minimal amount of shoreline engineering and few modified inlets, particularly when you compare the Georgia Bight with other places on the East Coast. A lot of areas with limited disturbance. And then we also have just inland from the coast, a great network of impoundments and managed wetlands as well. So all of these resources mean that we are hosting really significant numbers of shorebirds throughout the entire year. And that's one of the things that makes the Georgia Bight so cool, I think. You know, you could spend time in the Northeast and see a lot of shorebirds, but when you come to the Bight here in the Southeast, you can see shorebirds throughout the entire year and a huge variety of different shorebirds. So we're important for shorebirds during the migration period, during spring migration from March to May, and also during fall migration, which is going on right now, August to October. So we're starting to see birds from the Arctic coming down, migrating south, and stopping here in the Georgia Bight to rest and refuel on tremendous journeys that might take some of them all the way down to the southern reaches of South America. We're also important for shorebirds throughout the winter, which runs from about October to March. And we have, you know, good food resources and mild winters. And so that makes the Georgia coast a really ideal place to spend the winter if you're a shorebird. We host pretty significant numbers of the Great Lakes breeding population of piping plovers. Those are the federally endangered piping plovers. We actually last fall got the sighting of two of the chicks that hatched from Chicago, Monty and Rose's chicks, that stopped by. They didn't spend the winter here with us, but they did stop by on their journey south, and we're hoping to get to see the newest chicks soon as well. So we're an important place for that recovering population of piping plovers. And then of course, during the nesting season from about March all the way really until September, there could be chicks on the beach where we're hosting nesting species like American oyster catchers, Wilson's plovers. So because of the importance throughout the entire year, and in recognition of the significant numbers of shorebirds we have, we actually have two sites that have been recognized by the Western Hemisphere Shorebird Reserve Network here along the Georgia coast. We have the Altamaha River Delta that was designated in 1999 as a site of regional importance. And then just in 2017, the 100th Wizard site was designated, and that encompasses the entire Georgia Barrier Islands landscape. And so it is considered a landscape of hemispheric importance because we support more than 300,000 shorebirds annually. So just to break that down a little bit, you know, when we think about shorebirds and how they use the broader landscape of the hemisphere, we are a really important place within the Atlantic Flyway, which is this blue kind of series of paths here. And so we see birds really heavily relying on the Southeast, including up to over 300,000 shorebirds every single year. We host up to a third of the population of Rufa, the federally threatened red knot, and up to a third of those federally endangered Great Lakes breeding piping plovers. And so it's because of some of these numbers that we were designated as that landscape of hemispheric importance. And we're also a really important staging site for whimbrel. This is something that we've been working on with partners for a number of years now. Whimbrel are a pretty large brown shorebird with a decurved bill. And in the spring, we get a huge influx of whimbrel that are heading up to the Arctic to breed. And it looks like the Southeast is a really important place for those whimbrel to come and fatten up on fiddler crabs, actually, which is pretty cool. So shorebirds are, of course, a really compelling group of birds, in part because of these really fascinating and awe-inspiring migrations. So we're talking about birds that really do traverse from one end of the hemisphere to the other. Of course, red knots are one of the most well-known examples, with some of those long-distance migrants traveling from all the way down in the southern tip of South America near Tierra del Fuego and heading all the way up to the Arctic to breed. You know, traveling tens of thousands of miles every single year. So those migration stories can really be a great compelling reason and get people very excited about shorebird conservation. But shorebirds, of course, are also one of the more imperiled groups of birds as well. Since the 1970s, overall, there have been declines of shorebirds broadly as a group. Nearly 40% of all shorebird species, when pooled, are showing population declines. And we're seeing really the steepest population declines for those long distance migrants, birds like red knots and ruddy turnstone, species that nest up in the Arctic and then may winter as far south as southern South America. This story of shorebird population declines has been documented in public literature and news sources like the New York Times, where John Fitzpatrick and others published an article several years back about shorebird population declines. It's been noted in magazines and in state, federal, and local management plans as well, really taking a hard look at what it's going to take to protect these species of birds as we're seeing these pretty dramatic and alarming population declines. And there's a few reasons that shorebirds overall are so challenging when we're thinking about what it takes to conserve them, right? If you've gotten to spend any time during migration, or you've seen pictures from places like Delaware Bay, you know that shorebirds gather in really large groups at very specific places. They're drawn to places where they have good food resources, where they can rest, and where they can feel safe. And so those places become really very important. They exhibit what's called site fidelity. So the birds will come back every single year to the very same site. And so one single place can be very important. And if that one place is lost, it will have implications and ramifications for an entire population. They also cross huge geographic areas. So it takes a lot of cooperation internationally, as well as between partners at specific locations to protect these birds. And they depend on a very narrow type of habitat, right? This border between water and dry land that has a lot of challenges as well, from development and human population growth, and facing very big issues like climate change and contamination and issues with disturbance as well. And so in recognition for how important this part of the world is and all of those really large challenges, several years ago, Manomet launched the Georgia Bight Shorebird Conservation Initiative. And so our work really focuses on Northeast Florida, the Georgia coast, and the South Carolina coast as well. And within these regions, we have a variety of kind of local issues. One of the most significant is recreational disturbance. We view habitat loss as a really significant threat as well, issues with climate change and sea level rise, and low reproductive success. But luckily, we've got some really great tools in our toolbox. For one, there's partnerships and folks that have spent their careers and lives working to protect shorebirds. And so building out those partnerships, increasing capacity through creating greater alliances is one of the things that we can do. We have great opportunities for education and outreach and coordinated research and management as well to tackle some of these threats. And so that is what we're working on with the Georgia Bight Shorebird Conservation Initiative, really uniting the coast across all borders between different islands, different agencies, and different partners, with the recognition that this place is really important, that we can work together to protect this habitat for shorebirds. We have three main kind of channels of addressing these big threats: building out this regional network, working hard to maintain the valuable habitat that we do have, and then thinking ahead to the future, thinking about things like climate change and sea level rise and habitat restoration to make sure that we can continue to support these significant numbers of shorebirds into the future. So this afternoon, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the work that we're doing to address one of the most significant threats, which is recreational disturbance in shorebirds. Recreational disturbance is really important because it limits habitat availability. You might have a perfect beach with tons of food for shorebirds and good resting areas, but if there are a lot of people or people and dogs in that spot, it becomes functionally unavailable, right? It looks great, but the birds are not going to use it because it is no longer suitable. And we know from a whole host of research that has gone on across the whole Atlantic Flyway that when there is heavy recreational use, we see lowered body condition, including studies that have shown decreased survival for wintering piping plovers at crowded beaches. We know that dogs have a significant impact and that birds have a greater response to dogs. And when there are dogs and people, we see reduced nesting success. We see reduced feeding time. Birds are not able to feed as much. They waste energy from flying. And we even see that there are potential carryover effects where during migration, if birds face a lot of recreational disturbance, they might have reduced success in their breeding grounds. And that's what's considered a carryover effect. But the good news is that this also, where people and birds overlap, there's a great opportunity for education and outreach. And so that's one of the ways that we are trying to address this issue here at Manomet. Recreational disturbance can be a great number of things. Luckily, we don't have issues with a lot of driving on beaches, but that's an obvious one. But you know, sometimes people just don't realize their impacts when they visit a place that's important for shorebirds. And so it might be as simple as just a couple of groups of boaters in a place where birds are trying to nest or feed, and it becomes no longer suitable habitat for shorebirds. And unfortunately, we do see some really significant impacts for off-leash dogs where shorebirds are trying to feed or nest. Nesting shorebirds face a lot of threats with recreational disturbance. Birds can be on high alert. They might not feed their chicks. They may not be able to brood their chicks and keep them cool. In fact, there was just a couple of days ago a story from Connecticut of some bird photographers that were sitting out watching and taking photographs of an oyster catcher family for so long that the adults never actually went to feed the chick. They wouldn't leave it unattended and the chick starved to death. So there are a lot of ripple effects from recreational disturbance that people may not often be aware of. And of course, that's especially problematic because these chicks are designed to blend in with their environments, right? So, you know, it could be not even realizing how close you come to stepping on a little Wilson's plover chick, or unfortunately, this is an example from Little Tybee Island. Tim Keyes was out and found an oyster catcher chick that he had banded, surrounded by dog tracks, and it looked pretty clear that the dog had actually killed the chick. So it's not always direct mortality, but sometimes it is. And additionally, when we're talking about migration or wintering, disturbance means less time to feed, lower body weights, which means birds may not be able to survive the winter as well. They may not be able to roost, to take that energy and convert it into fat that could carry them to the Arctic or take them safely through a cold winter. So we have a couple of different tools that I'm going to talk about briefly. One is a project that we're focusing on public beaches. And so we have sites along the Georgia coast that we're working with a variety of different partners, working on increasing education and outreach and really framing certain very important areas as wildlife beach zones, areas that people can be aware that these specific places are important for shorebirds. One great example is Gould's Inlet. If you've come to St. Simons, you know, if you want to go see the birds, you go to Gould's Inlet. And so helping raise awareness for that place as a wildlife beach zone is one of the tools that we're working on with partners at Virginia Tech Shorebird Lab, the Dire Human Dimensions Lab at Virginia Tech, and Georgia DNR, as well as Georgia Ornithological Society and Coastal Georgia Audubon, with support from NIFWIF. So a huge project that looks at how we can address disturbance at public access beaches. Another super exciting project that we're working on with partners at UGA Marine Extension and Georgia Sea Grant, particularly with Katie Higgins, who's the PI on this project, is partnering with Kayak Guides and outfits to raise awareness about how impacts at some of the more remote places can be detrimental to shorebirds. So we launched just this past year, we had our first cohort of 17 guides from across the whole Georgia coast who participated in the Coastal Awareness and Responsible Ecotourism Certification Program. And that acronym comes out to CARE, which is really great. So we have 17 CARE certified guides on the Georgia coast. And that project was supported by a coastal incentive grant hosted through Georgia DNR. We basically built an online educational platform with 4 weeks of content. We had local experts come and talk to the guides. They worked through all of the content. They had to pass certain evaluation measures. And then we had an in-person field day as well, where we all got out together to talk about the importance of reducing disturbance at some remote areas for both migrating and nesting shorebirds. With the idea that we're going to build this community, we have extra eyes on the water, and building this partnership between managers and guides to really help make sure that we can maintain these habitats in the middle and long term for shorebirds. Another project that we're working on is reaching out to the recreational boater community, because again, they're accessing some of these remote places like inlets and sandbars that both migrating and nesting shorebirds depend on. We're just starting that project in partnership with Georgia DNR and again, support from National Fish and Wildlife Foundation to start surveys. And so we've been surveying boaters at these remote places, and then using that information, we're going to build education and outreach at mainland access points. So the main places that people leave, like marinas and public boat ramps, increasing signage and launching volunteer stewards at these places so that they can talk to the boaters before they even get out to the remote places that shorebirds need. This is very effective because a lot of the people that visit these remote places love them. They have huge emotional ties to those places. And so it's a little bit more effective sometimes, I think, than just talking to tourists who might only be visiting the Georgia coast for a few days. Instead, we're talking to people who come out to these places every single weekend, and they have been for 25 years. So they're really invested in protecting these places. And it's every conversation we've had has just blown me away with how excited people are. They may not know much about shorebirds, but we can work to change that. But they are really excited about the idea, and they love these places and want to see them protected into the future. A couple other tools that we have in our toolbox to protect shorebirds. We have all these programs here at Manomet, more broadly with all of the partners like Georgia DNR and the wonderful work that everybody at Georgia Audubon is doing and the work that Sergio has done. But how do we know that these things are having an impact? Well, we have shorebird counts. The International Shorebird Survey was launched in 1974 by Manomet, and it is run mostly by volunteers out counting shorebirds at their favorite places. This information in turn gets used in real time to pull together the data to understand what's happening at a large scale with shorebird populations. So that chart I showed in the beginning with the declines, that data comes from the International Shorebird Survey. So that's something that if you're on the coast or even inland and there's a nice sod farm and you see a lot of shorebirds, you can get involved with International Shorebird Survey, and I'll have my contact information at the end here. And then lastly, one of the really big picture tools that we have is the Western Hemisphere Shorebird Reserve Network. And so that is housed within Manomet, and it is a network of over 100 sites across the whole hemisphere in recognition of the idea that shorebirds need a variety of different places and partners at each of these sites. So this network helps provide that recognition to sites, raise awareness, raises pride within each location, and provides a variety of resources to make sure that everybody can work together to protect shorebirds, because that's what it takes. You know, these local efforts within the Georgia Bight have huge ripples that can make a difference for shorebirds from across our whole entire hemisphere. And so I'm going to wrap it up talking about the work that we're doing. Here's my contact information, and I'll pass the screen back to Karina.
Right, Abby, thank you so much for all that wonderful information. And it's so cool that we get to hear directly from someone who is boots on the ground all year round, helping to conserve shorebirds. So next we're going to go over to Sergio Sabat-Bonilla, who's going to be talking to us about the work that he's been doing over the past year as it relates to collecting data on some of the birds found on Georgia's coast, specifically on Gecko Island. So Sergio, the floor is yours. Oh, actually, before you do that, I wanted to share that our monthly meeting in October So remember the two piping plovers that Abby mentioned, Monty and Rose? We're going to be sharing, watching the movie about them. There's a little documentary about that pair of plovers. And so for our October monthly meeting, we'll be showing that. So I just wanted to throw that in there. All right, Sergio, now the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Corina. So yeah, let me go ahead and start the presentation. Is everyone able to see it?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Well, yeah, like I said, Corina said, my name is Sergio Sabat. I'm not from Georgia, but I spent enough time and I've enjoyed my stay for the 3 years that I was there. This past year, I was the Georgia Sea Grant State Fellow. And within that, I was working with not only the University of Georgia Marine Extension, I was also working with Georgia Audubon and Gecko Island Authority, trying to cultivate strategies and delivering opportunities where birds and people can thrive along Georgia's coastline. So in here, the goals of my fellowships were pretty much focused on the international shorebird survey, just like Abby explained, utilizing that framework that Manomet has built to better understand the physiographical and temporal patterns that shorebird diversity happen within Gecko Island across the year. And within this, not only was I looking just at a general context of all shorebirds that occur in that island, but also I was focusing on American oyster catchers, piping plovers, and red knots due to their conservation concern. And within this, I was focused within three environmental variables just to help Gecko Island understand a little bit more what were the areas of most presence throughout the community, how were tides affecting, as well as time of day and year, how were all these influencing the different patterns in abundance across the whole season. So a little bit about Gecko Island State Park. They're pretty much, their slogan is, they're the stewards of Gecko Island past, present, and future. Pretty much they're dedicated to maintain a delicate balance between nature and humankind. And this is important balance. It's important to talk about because Gecko Island is pretty much fully maintained by taxes and fees, as well as the operating costs. It all comes from people coming in and out of the state park. So the humankind aspect of it pretty much controls the whole overall context of the island. And within that, Gecko Island Authority, which is where I was working at under the guidance of Ben Carswell and Yank Moore, pretty much they oversee the whole context of conservation, the development and the management of the whole Gecko Island. So as you might already think, they have a lot of work to do. So that's where I fit in. I was helping them pretty much guide that already established shorebird conservation program and trying to fit in new areas that would not only help them better understand the patterns throughout a year, but also help them be more conscious about their management and time as well in terms of the resources. So some of the environmental constraints, Abby talked about it very eloquently. So I'm going to talk about it briefly in terms of the context of Gecko Island. As you can see here from these photos, this small island has quite the diversity in habitat. So all of this, as you might already know from what Abby was talking about, influences what shorebirds are there, influences the time of year that they come, the food availability, as well as the suitability to maintain these populations. And this is where the context of our influence as humans plays a major role. Not only is the environment ever changing, not only within a tide, within a day, within the season, but the fluxes of people also are playing major roles in these habitat constraints. So this was something that I was very interested in knowing how do these play out throughout the year, and how does this show up in terms of the data that I was gathering. In terms of the species of interest, again, as Abby talked about earlier, these three have been well documented as having not only habitat loss or degradation, again, due to us humans and other environmental changes, but the nest disturbance and predation has been key topics of trying to understand and reduce, just so they can better expand into their original distributions. And some of the context of this, pretty much for the piping plover, most of the population that Gecko Island gathers is kind of like what Abby was saying, is from that Midwestern population. And pretty much it's overwintering here at Gecko Island. The same with the red knots. Most of the population that we see is just non-breeding residents that overwinter through their passage. And similar with this, our American oyster catchers, well, do we see more permanent populations? It was interesting to see that divergence in terms of time scales that I'll be showing later. In terms of the sampling zone, again, Gecko Island has been participating for all this time in the ISS, International Shorebird Survey. So that they've already had set up 4 zones where of major conservation efforts have been done before. So a portion of my study was to see if it would be viable to expand that zone to cover the whole island. So that's where you see the north zone and the embankment zone. These 2 areas were not included in previous years ISS. So I was trying to see if by including that we would be further improving the documentation of shorebirds, and if we're starting to see major patterns that should be added to in terms of the future perspective of the conservation plan of Gecko Island. And in terms of sampling, I just wanted to show off how good of a year I had spending in the beach. So pretty much it would be all throughout. Again, I was sampling the whole island. So they gave me this motorized bike that I was allowed to use along the beach. So with my binoculars and my scope, I was a pretty happy dude exploring the island and learning about these birds for the full year. So as you see in that photo, I have big smiles every day as I was working. I couldn't complain. In terms of the patterns that I was able to encounter, again, not only while I was focused mainly on 3 species, the overall population and management of the shorebirds is important. So in here, I'm starting off showing kind of like the mean monthly abundance of these shorebirds that I was able to see across all zones. Pretty much it's showing in terms of the box plot. So it's showing within the 50% range of the population. The red circles to show the mean, so the average amount of birds that we saw within each month. And then the line in the middle of the box plot is just the median. So right at the 50% range of the population. And in here we see that there's clearly a trend within the changing of the seasons between winter and spring. So clearly this is where most of the population of shorebirds are found within Gecko Island. So this was an interesting pattern to see, but nothing new in that regard. So it's something that has been well documented so far. And again, in terms of the time of the day, which is of interest as well, we started to see some pattern with more abundance in the mornings, as well as in the afternoon. And in terms of the amount of abundance between tides, we do see a slight increase in terms of mid-rising and high tides, but it was only as we started to see a little bit in more details, these patterns started to show that a little bit more. So as we look at the mid-monthly abundance of shorebirds in the north zone, again, this is a new zone that I was sampling to see if it would be of interest for Gecko Island. We start seeing a huge increase in the winter months, and then a quick drop off and a slight increase into the summer. That definitely would be impacting the amount of shorebirds in the island in regards to the ISS. And then this pattern again shows in the embankment zone, which is in the other area that wasn't being documented before. You start seeing that huge increase from the winter into the summer months, with the gaps between the start of spring. And this is in comparison to the zone 3, which would be kind of like the reserve zone, the most well-documented area at Gecko Island. This area is well known to have the highest diversity of shorebirds, so it is already well maintained. So this was the standard that we were basing all 4 other zones at. And here you see that there's not only a good difference in the abundance between the other zones, but also the patterns are relatively stable. Pretty much you see a huge relative increase in the winter months, and then it's a slight dip, as well as an increase again in March. Some of the other patterns in terms of, again, the time of day between the zones, you will start seeing in the north zone and the embankment zones have a relative difference. We started seeing more mornings in the embankment zones, while in the north zone, pretty much the afternoon was the best time to go sample. And this is a little bit different from the already expected zone 3, where the mornings was relatively the time of the day to go sample, as it had the most abundance of shorebirds. In terms of, again, the species of interest, so Amoy being the American oyster catcher, pretty much we only saw, I was only able to see them in zone 3. So this would allow Gecko Island to just pretty much limit their scope and reduce the amount of time that they have to spend, that very important time that they have to spend looking at these specific birds, because again, the data already shows that it is only focused within one area, and pretty much it's only seen in February and April. That dip was pretty interesting to find. In terms of red knots, these were a little more well distributed, but again, didn't pass more than the southern tip of the island. And these were mostly found the mid-rising to high mid-rising tide, and pretty much the highest concentration were outside of the morning, so midday and afternoon. So they gave a little more leeway in terms of when they could go sample these specific birds. And then these were pretty much only found in November and December, as these had the highest concentrations. And in terms of the piping plovers, they were a lot more well distributed across the island. But pretty much I would just wanted to point out in these ones that the most interesting pattern was that they were focused on pretty much mostly within the middle section of the island, which is the most populous portion of the island. So most populous in terms of human interactions. That's where most of the hotels are. That's where most of the people that come visit the state park go into the beach. So it was very interesting to find that even though this is the zone that had the most impact in terms of human interactions, these were pretty much where we were seeing most of the piping plovers. So pretty much this begs the question as to why. And this is something that I'll be, through my information, Gecko Island can expand on and maybe start testing to see what is the constant, like what is impact, like what is promoting this pattern. Could be many different things, from very good food availability to habitat selection. So this is something that at least I didn't expect to find. And again, in terms of conclusion, not only did I have an awesome year sampling my way through the Gecko Island and pretty much learning about these birds, but I was able to find some good information that will help the Gecko Island Authority group better implement their management strategies across the year and in a more efficient manner into the future. So I feel very proud of the job I did, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about my research.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sergio. Even though you weren't here for a long time, it was very much a good time, and we are excited to see you flourish in your new stage at Virginia Tech. Thank you so much for sharing your work and your findings. That was very interesting to see the spatial pattern and layout of where certain species were found and the kind of temporal changes behind when they were found. So last but not least, we're going to have Adam Vetchual, Georgia Audubon's Conservation Director, share a little bit about and contextualize a little bit the work that Georgia Audubon is doing on Georgia's coast and what we hope to see in the future. So Adam, I'll pass it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Karina. And good afternoon, everybody. I will make sure to get you out of here on time so you can enjoy the rest of your Sunday. For those of you who I don't know, again, my name is Adam and I am the Conservation Director for Georgia Audubon. And since Abby already did such a great job kind of highlighting why the Georgia coast is so special, what birds her and DNR and other partners are working on, and then Sergio kind of pivoting into his work specifically with the Gecko Island Authority, I wanted to give you a kind of a recap of what we are doing at Georgia Audubon on the coast and what we hope to do moving forward. So the past year, as it's been for everyone, has been an interesting time, to put it in a positive light. But just to give you some framework in case you're newer to Georgia Audubon, it was just barely a year ago that we made this decision to go statewide or officially made that jump. Prior to that, we were just an Atlanta-based chapter. And so there's been a lot of work to figure out what does that look like and how do we plug in outside of the metro Atlanta area, specifically on the coast, which is an area that we were focused on and thought we could bring some support to. One of the first things, or the first thing that we did, was bring on Sergio. So we've had a great relationship with the Sea Grant Fellowship Program through UGA, and Sergio's allowed us to kind of dip our toes into those coastal waters. And also our partnership with the JIA, who Sergio just talked about. We co-sponsored Sergio. They allowed us to do that work that was of interest to them and us, the plover work and other shorebird monitoring, and really kind of, again, get us established, spend more time with Abby, spend more time with Tim Keyes and other DNR, and just kind of get Georgia Audubon visible in that part of the state. The other thing which Sergio did not talk about, even though it's been a huge portion of his work, is in addition to the monitoring that he's been doing, he's been drafting kind of a roadmap for Georgia Audubon in the region. That's kind of his other big component. And so when he finishes up and moves on to Virginia Tech for his PhD, we will have a little more guidance, a little more experience, and some relationships on the coast to kind of inform us what's next. What can we do? Where can we plug in? How can we support others? And of course, another thing that he was hoping to do was community outreach and education, lead field trips, do more stuff with the local chapters. Abby mentioned the Coastal Georgia Audubon chapter in Brunswick. We also have our friends at Ogeechee Audubon in Savannah. That's been very tough during the COVID time. So we still have a lot to do, but this was kind of, again, just barely getting the ball rolling and figuring out a way for us to plug in. So to give you that kind of background and framework, what are we doing next? So the first thing we're doing is we have a new Sergio. This is Kim Savides. We had such success with the Georgia Sea Grant Fellowship Program and with Sergio that we decided to go in again this year. And instead of co-sponsoring a fellow with a partner like JIA, this year we're doing it all on our own. So Kim actually starts in just over a week, September 1st, and she will be our fellow for the coming year. She has a ton of field experience, lots of bird banding, and very reminiscent to Abby, she is a graduate of SUNY ESF, and she also has spent some time, not as a naturalist, but she has spent some time out at Little St. Simon's Island, where you can see her holding that painted bunting on the right photo. So we are very excited about Kim joining our team, and she allows us to build off the momentum that Sergio started and really grow the Georgia Audubon initiatives and programs down on the coast. So what are some of these programs? So we have a few existing programs that we are going to expand and, again, bring to this region. And one is our habitat restoration work. So we've really been expanding our work here. We are building an in-house Georgia Audubon restoration crew. We are doing more and more projects around Metro Atlanta. And fingers crossed, we will be doing a lot down on the coast, specifically Gecko Island. So any day now, we are waiting to hear back on two grant proposals that we put in late last year and early this year that will allow us to do some maritime dune restoration with JIA and with other partners, including Coastal Georgia Audubon chapter. And it's kind of right on the eastern edge of Gecko Island, above the convention center, south of the village. If you've been to a GOS meeting in the past, you can see on the right here, this is kind of what the landscape looks like. There are some pockets of good native coastal grasses, muhly grasses, other exciting things. But there's a lot of turf grass and a lot of habitat that could be improved. And so a lot of our work you'll see is coastal, and that it's in the region of the coast, but not on the beach or on where the shorebirds are, I guess, to put it in a different way. So we are hoping to do more and more habitat restoration work along the coast and to build our program more or less down in that region. And JIA and on Gecko is where we hope to do that first. Additionally, we are expanding our sanctuary program. So if you've been around Georgia Audubon for a while, you know this program well. If you are new, this program is centered on the idea of how can we create more bird-friendly habitat? How can we improve our backyards, our gardens, our churches, our workspaces so that we can coexist with birds, that we're providing native resources, that we are keeping our cats indoors, that we are making our shared built environment healthy for birds. This program has been in Atlanta. We then expanded it to Athens as we partnered with the Oconee Rivers Audubon Society. Sorry, there's all these O chapters, Okmulgee, Ogeechee, Oconee. It's hard to keep them straight sometimes. But one thing that we've done is we have brought this program virtually. So we have a new conservation program coordinator, and he's going to help us grow this program and use one of the very few positive things that have come from the past year and a half is this virtual connectivity that we all have now, our familiarity with Zoom, with Google Meet, with other platforms. And so we are going to now have an available option for you to get your yard or green space certified no matter where you are in the state. And we're going to do that virtually, and we're going to really try to push this out on the coast. So hopefully we can get the other chapters to buy in, get some volunteers, and bring our sanctuary program to all Georgians who are interested. There are many other that I'm just barely going to touch on for the sake of time. Our collision reduction work through Project Safe Flight, that is something that we are expanding statewide, and we have had talks with interested parties on the coast about doing some retrofits down there. So the photo on the left is of the Chattahoochee Nature Center from a couple years ago. You probably can barely make out that it has some nice white dots on the windows, and that is to make it more friendly for birds and reduce collisions. So we are in talks with some partners down there to do similar installations along the coast. We have our Lights Out initiative. You know, as Abby mentioned, fall migration has already started, especially for shorebirds, but even for songbirds. Many of our songbirds migrate at night, and they collide with illuminated facades, or they're sucked in by bright lights where they then might hit reflective glass. So we are trying to get people to reduce lighting, commercial properties and homeowners like yourselves, during the spring and fall months. And we're working with 100 Miles and others on the coast because there's already so much momentum about lighting and turtles. So hopefully there can be a lighting in turtles and humans and birds. Just let's have less light for a healthier ecosystem out there. So that's something we're bringing to the coast, as well as our Plants for Birds initiatives. How can we get more natives on the ground? In a couple weeks, I'll be speaking at the Coastal Wildscapes native plant sale in Darien. So if you're down on the coast, please come and see me and hear me talk about some of our programs. But again, these things that we've already have had some success with in Metro Atlanta that we think we can bring down to those coastal counties. One thing I want to share with you hot off the press is we are working with Kyle Horton of Colorado State on some Lights Out information, including some predicting forecasts. This is like birdcasts that Cornell puts out. This is just going to be a Georgia specific portal with all sorts of cool information. We'll have this on our website sometime soon, but this is tonight. So you'll see that birds are moving this evening in the northwest corner of the state, all the way down through the Piedmont and the northern coastal plain. So we're going to have some cool features like this on our website to look at nocturnal migration, lights out, and how we can make the entire state of Georgia safer for birds. Now, moving away from our existing programs, these are kind of the new things we're trying to build out. One is partnerships. So Georgia DNR, Manomet, JIA, all these groups who are the experts on shorebirds, on coastal ornithology, on coastal conservation. We hope to supplement their work. We want to expand what they're doing. We want to, there are only a handful, unfortunately, of really good shorebird people in Georgia, and there's too much work for them to do. So we're hoping that through our Sea Grant Fellowship, through our larger statewide network, and as we grow, that we can supplement their work. So here's a picture of Sergio helping Tim, Kais, and others ban some oyster catchers. The photo on the right of the painted bunting, we've had some exciting talks with Dr. Clark Rushing, who's the incoming ornithologist at UGA, about maybe doing some work with him. And Kim, I failed to mention, Kim Savides, our new fellow, was a student under Clark before. So we're really hoping that we can just play our role in the larger ornithological community on the coast to make these projects grow and flourish, and we can add our little flair however it's needed. So that's something we hope to do, that Sergio really got the ball rolling on. And then beyond that, of course, we want to create our own projects and lead projects that we think we could excel at. These are still in development, something Kim and I will be working on heavily the rest of the year. We've had some interesting talks about maybe there's some work to do with our dark wading birds. So you can see the tricolored heron there. blending in a lot more than the bright snowy egret in the front. You know, there's lots of data missing on our dark wading birds, on where they roost and where they nest and their success. They're harder to monitor, especially if you're trying to do something from an aerial photo or from a plane or a helicopter, because they blend in with the substrate, they blend in with the vegetation. So that's something that we're looking at that could be not only a scientific project that we're leading, but also a community science opportunity. And then maybe some habitat focused, landscape focused work, not just species specific. So more and more coming from myself and from Georgia Audubon as we continue to build out our role on the coast. And then finally, we are an Audubon chapter. We have the wonderful Karina Newsom on our team now. There's going to be more and more engagement, outreach, community science opportunities. You know, I'm lucky enough to lead a couple bird trips down to the coast each year. They're so much fun. We will continue to offer those and hopefully tweak them in unique and fun ways. Climate Watch, which is a nationwide initiative that we run through the state of Georgia. We're trying to work more with the chapters on the coast to get people out monitoring for our climate threatened and endangered species. And as an Audubon chapter, we have a voice that some organizations don't. So we hope to play our role and speak up for things like, or speak out against things like Spaceport Camden and other initiatives when appropriate. You know, there are very great advocacy groups on the coast, like the aforementioned 100 miles, but we hope we can add some weight when appropriate moving forward. And so with that, I think hopefully right on time. I want to thank you for my brief section and for giving your time on this Sunday to hear Abby, Sergio, and myself talk. And I'm sure we will gladly take some questions or comments.
All right, thank you so much, Adam. Abby and Sergio, it was so wonderful to hear about all the work that you're doing and the work that's going to be happening. We have, looks like, one question in the Q&A that asks, can any of our speakers provide an update on the environmental impacts, specifically on birds, of the cargo ship that capsized off of the Georgia coast in 2019? Great question, Angela. Thank you.
How about you, Abby?
Yeah, so Georgia DNR has been working through a framework that was set up in part with Coast Guard and others, Coastal Resources Division, called Unified Command. There's actually, I can find it and we can send it out. You can sign up for updates from them, so you can get, daily or near daily updates about what is going on with the cleanup of the ship. It is nearing, there's one final cut left to make, and then 2 more sections that need to be pulled out, and then the majority of the ship itself will be removed. But of course, there are impacts that are happening. There's a variety of organizations in addition to those that I just mentioned that are monitoring it, including Altamaha Riverkeeper and 100 Miles as well. So we've seen impacts. There's been some oiling that has been visible on the marshes. There's been some oiled wildlife as well, some birds that were impacted. Those were collected and cleaned and released back to the spot where they were found. But it's been so far fairly discrete events where oil has been released into the environment that we know about. And so there's a lot of people keeping tabs on it and doing monitoring and trying to make sure that impacts are minimized. But of course, the last couple of sections here, I think everybody's got a close eye on, because it's a big mess, a big undertaking to clean it up. So.
Thank you so much, Abby, for providing information on that. Adam? I don't have anything else to add. If we're moving on, I had a question and a comment, unless anyone has anything else. My question is to you, Abby. Earlier, you were talking about Monty and Rose, the Chicago plovers, and how their offspring, I think 2 of the 3 wintered on the Georgia coast. Do you know if there is any fidelity or any relationship amongst siblings of different years? Like, do we know if it's more likely that their offspring will also overwinter here, or is it a bit of a random thing?
I personally don't know the answer to that exactly. So a lot of piping plovers are banded. So I have confidence that someone knows that. Those two chicks were seen in different spots. One was on Cumberland and one was on Little Egg Island Bar. And they didn't stay the winter. They just stopped through. And then I think the third chick was down in the Gulf of Florida. So they didn't leave together and they didn't fly together and they didn't land together. Or if they did, they spread out. Like I'm super curious about it. And it's a really fun thing to get to watch. But they do, piping plovers generally have a lot of site fidelity. So, we'll see the same banded bird that might winter in the same spot year after year after year. And so I suspect that probably those chicks have stopped over or will stop over. And it's just if Pat and Doris Leary are out to see them or Tim gets his chance to see them and we get another report. And then of course, this year's generation of Monty and Rose's chicks as well would be exciting to look for.
Yeah, that'd be really cool. If you all haven't done it, if you bird on the coast, it's, I don't know, maybe it's because I used to do so much field work, but resighting banded birds is like the coolest thing ever. And it was last year, I was lucky enough to be on Little St. Simon's and we went out to their main beach and there was a piping plover and I got the band. I was like, that kind of sounds familiar. And I reported it and I had seen the exact same individual one day, almost an entire year. I think it was one day off at the exact same spot at Little St. Simon's. So yeah, that site fidelity is legit in piping plovers. It was the exact same spot. It was amazing.
That's incredible.
And then the other plug I'm going to do, only because Karina kind of teased it and then Abby set it up so perfect that I'll spike it here. With the Georgia Audubon travel program, we are about to announce a trip in about 9 days. And I'll be leading to Argentina next September. So it'll be to see all the cool Argentine birds, but it's also timed perfectly for the arrival of the southbound migrants. So, go see Abby or myself or someone at Audubon on the Georgia coast and see those birds. And then a month or two later, come with me and we'll see them down with, amazing South American birds. So September 1st, keep your eye out on the Georgia Audubon website for those offerings.
Awesome. All right. Well, with that, we are over time. Adam, Abby, Sergio, thank you so much. In the chat, I just put Abby's email along with Adam's, as well as the websites to Manomet and Georgia Audubon. So if you want to learn more about the programs that we have to offer and how you can get involved, you can check us out there. Again, thank you all so much for coming and thank you to our panelists. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. Go see some birds, everybody. Have a good rest of your summer.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Thanks, Abby.
Thank you. Bye.